Elias had always been a man of routine. Life on the remote colony at the edge of known space was quiet, almost painfully so, and most of his days were spent monitoring sensors, checking communications, and ensuring that nothing unusual happened on the perimeter. The human outpost was small, just a few domed structures surrounded by the thick alien forests of the planet. Beyond those trees, nobody really knew what existed, and that uncertainty was both frightening and fascinating. For Elias, it was the perfect place to be alone with his thoughts, but it was also a place where surprises could appear at any moment. One morning, as Elias was conducting a routine survey of the forest edge, he noticed something unusual. A small movement caught his eye, a flicker of color in the dense green shadows. He paused, scanning carefully, and saw it again, a tiny figure stumbling along the uneven ground. At first, Elias thought it might be some native animal, but the way the figure moved, almost like it was learning how to walk, made him realize this was something else entirely. His heart began to race, not from fear, but from curiosity. He approached, slowly, careful not to scare whatever it was. As he drew nearer, he saw the figure more clearly. It was a child, a small, fragile-looking creature, clearly not human, with large luminous eyes and a soft, almost shimmering skin that seemed to shift colors slightly in the light. The child looked around, confused and frightened, as if it didn't know where to go or what to do. Elias felt a surge of protectiveness. There was no question in his mind. He could not leave this child alone in the forest. The child noticed him at the same moment and froze. Its eyes widened in alarm, and a small plaintive sound came from its throat, a sound that was neither human nor anything Elias had heard before, yet somehow he understood it as a call for help. Despite the danger, he stepped closer and held out his hand slowly, trying to appear non-threatening. The child hesitated, trembling, but did not run. There was a trust, however small, forming in that moment, and Elias knew he had to act carefully. He quickly realized that the child was injured. There was a scrape along its arm, and it was limping slightly. Elias had some basic medical supplies in his pack, enough to clean and bandage minor injuries. He spoke gently, trying to comfort the child with words it could not understand, and then carefully cleaned the wound and wrapped it. The child flinched at first, but gradually relaxed as Elias's hands moved slowly and carefully. Something inside him, a deep sense of duty and empathy, told him that this child's safety was now his responsibility. Once the immediate injury was addressed, Elias faced a dilemma. He knew the rules. Humans were not supposed to interact with the Xyrans, the alien species he had only observed from a distance until now. There were strict protocols about maintaining distance, about avoiding contact at all costs. But as he looked into the child's large, frightened eyes, he felt the rules fall away. The child did not belong in danger. It was innocent, and it had no part in whatever conflicts existed between humans and Xyrans. For the first time in his life, Elias decided that doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. He carried the child back to the outpost, careful to stay out of sight from the forest's edge, where patrolling sensors might detect them. He hid the child in one of the small storage rooms, making it as comfortable as possible with blankets and supplies. The child was quiet now, watching him with curious eyes, and Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was the beginning of a connection, something neither of them fully understood yet, but it was undeniable. Over the next few days, Elias learned more about the child. He discovered small habits, like the way the child tilted its head when trying to understand human words, or how it seemed to recognize emotions and respond to them with a kind of intuitive intelligence. There was a gentle curiosity about the world in the child's eyes, and Elias found himself marveling at it. He began to talk to the child regularly, though he knew the words would be lost in translation. Still, the act of speaking, of sharing, moments seemed to calm the child and create a bond. Meanwhile, life in the outpost continued. Other humans noticed changes in Elias. He seemed distracted, often wandering off alone, and sometimes he appeared tense or lost in thought. Rumors began to circulate quietly among the small group of colonists. Whispers of, "He's hiding something and he's acting strangely," reached ears Elias didn't expect, but he paid little attention. His focus was entirely on the child whom he had come to call Kale. The name came naturally. It seemed to fit the child's small, delicate presence. Caring for Kale was not easy. There were challenges every day. Feeding him, understanding his needs, keeping him calm when unfamiliar sounds or lights frightened him. Elias learned to be patient, to observe and anticipate, to speak with gentle tones, and offer comfort through actions as much as words. In return, Kale began to trust him. The child would follow Elias quietly, reaching out for his hand when afraid, responding to his voice, and sometimes even attempting small gestures to communicate. It was a slow, delicate dance of learning and understanding, but it was also deeply rewarding. As the days passed, Elias's sense of responsibility deepened. He knew that if the Zyrans found Kyle, they might take him back, or worse, he didn't know what might happen. He also knew that if the human authorities discovered him, he could face punishment. Yet despite the risks, Elias felt a certainty he had never experienced before. Kale's safety was his mission, and nothing else mattered. Protecting the child became more than an obligation. It became a purpose. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the alien forest, Elias sat beside Kale, watching him sleep. He thought about the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, the fragility of life, and the strange, unpredictable ways in which bonds were formed. He felt a quiet awe, realizing that in this small, hidden room on the edge of the galaxy, a connection had begun, one that could change both their lives in ways he could not yet imagine. Elias did not know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would protect this child no matter the cost, and in that promise there was a courage and determination that would guide him through whatever challenges lay ahead. Days turned into weeks, and Elias's life became a delicate balance between his duties at the colony and caring for Kyle. The child, small and fragile when Elias first found him, had begun to show signs of growth and confidence. His large, expressive eyes no longer held the same fear, and he began moving with a cautious curiosity, exploring the small hidden space Elias had prepared for him. Elias watched every small gesture and every smile, amazed at the way Kale seemed to understand him, without words. Feeding Kale became an adventure of discovery. The child's diet was different from anything Elias had learned about humans. Certain fruits and grains seemed to delight him, while other foods were met with a small shake of the head or a puzzled tilt. Elias experimented patiently, often preparing meals by hand, watching Kale's reactions carefully, and noting which items brought a contented hum or a playful glance. Slowly, they developed a rhythm. Feeding became not just a necessity but a time for shared moments, where laughter and gentle smiles bridged the differences between species. Communication was another challenge. Kale did not speak in words, at least not in a way Elias could understand, but he had a rich language of gestures and expressions. Elias learned to watch carefully, the way Kale's ears twitched, the subtle shifts in skin color that reflected emotion, the tiny hand movements that indicated curiosity or caution. Elias responded with patience and encouragement, using simple sounds, gestures, and touch. Over time, a silent language formed between them, a bond built on observation, trust, and shared moments. The more Elias learned about Kale, the more he realized how intelligent and sensitive the child was. Kale would often mimic Elias's actions, trying to understand how the human moved or spoke. Sometimes Elias would catch him watching intently, his luminous eyes following every motion. Elias began to teach Kale small things, like stacking objects, pointing to items, or responding to simple sounds. Kale's progress amazed him. Despite the differences in species, there was a clear spark of understanding, and Elias felt a deep pride in the child's curiosity and eagerness to learn. Kale, in turn, showed signs of protecting Elias in subtle ways. One day, as Elias worked on a sensor near the edge of the forest, Kale made a small warning gesture, a soft, urgent sound and a pointing motion toward the approaching shadows of the trees. Elias paused and looked, realizing that Cale had sensed something he could not. It was a small, instinctive act, but it filled Elias with wonder. Here was a child from a species considered hostile by humans, yet this child, whom he had saved, had an instinct to protect him in return. Their bond was no longer one-sided, it was mutual, built on trust, care, and shared experience. Life in the hidden room continued with a quiet rhythm. Elias would spend mornings performing his duties at the colony, scanning for anomalies and monitoring, communications and afternoons with Cale, exploring ways to teach, comfort, and play. They found small games that transcended language, stacking objects, moving patterns on the floor, and creating simple puzzles that challenged Cale's curiosity. Laughter, rare in the sterile colony, became a constant companion in their hidden sanctuary. Elias began to feel a warmth and fulfillment he had never experienced before, and Kyle's trust in him deepened every day. Despite the growing comfort, there was always the shadow of danger. Elias knew that Xyrans would be searching for their child, and humans might question his unusual behavior. The awareness kept him vigilant. He reinforced the room, hid supplies, and even learned to move more quietly through the colony. Every rustle or unexpected noise caused a moment of tension, but each time Elias reminded himself why he was doing this. Protecting Kyle was more than an act of kindness. It was an act of moral courage. And every time Kyle smiled or reached for him, that courage was renewed. Elias also began reflecting deeply on morality, empathy, and duty. In his training, humans had always been taught to see alien species as threats, unless proven otherwise. But Cale was not a threat. He was innocent, fragile, and full of life. Elias realized that compassion often required bending the rules and taking personal risk. This realization did not come easily. It weighed on him, but it also gave him purpose. Caring for Cale became a way of defining who he truly was, beyond the expectations of others or the strict protocols of his job. One evening, Elias noticed something new. Cale had begun attempting simple vocalizations, sounds that were almost like words. He would repeat small noises after Elias spoke, sometimes mimicking laughter or tone. It was imperfect and often inconsistent, but it was progress, and Elias encouraged it with warmth and excitement. He would clap his hands or smile broadly, and Cale would respond with a small, proud gesture, a tilt of the head or a gentle hum. Each day brought small victories, building confidence and a sense of achievement for both of them. Elias began to sense Cale's emotional needs in a new way. The child would shy away from sudden movements, hide under blankets when loud noises echoed, and sometimes stare silently into the distance, as if processing thoughts too complex to express. Elias learned to offer comfort without words. A gentle touch on the shoulder, a soothing tone, a hand held in reassurance. Cale responded quickly, curling closer or looking up with trust-filled eyes. The silent language between them had grown stronger, and their bond was now visible in every glance, gesture, and shared moment. The colony itself became less important to Elias than the hidden room where he and Cale shared their days. He often thought about the larger world outside, the humans who might not understand, the Xyrians who might search, but he no longer feared it in the same way. What mattered was here and now, Cale's safety, his comfort, and the small but profound connection that had formed between them. Elias knew he had found a purpose far greater than routine, duty, or protocol. By the end of the second week, it was clear that Kyle had become more than just a child Elias had rescued. He was a companion, a small being who taught Elias patience, empathy, and the strength found in gentleness. The bond they shared was no longer fragile. It had begun to shape the very rhythm of Elias's life. Each day Elias felt gratitude for the unexpected encounter that had brought them together, and each day Cale responded with trust and affection, creating a silent promise between them, that they would face the future together, whatever it might bring. As the twin moons rose over the alien forest one night, Elias watched Cale sleep, small and serene. He thought about the days behind them and the unknowns ahead. There were challenges yet to come, dangers he could not predict, and rules he had broken that might have consequences. But in that quiet room, lit softly by moonlight, Elias felt a certainty he had never known. He would protect Kyle, guide him, and nurture him. And in return, Kyle had already given him something precious: trust, love, and the knowledge that life could hold unexpected beauty, even in the most unlikely places. One quiet morning, as Elias and Kale shared a simple meal in their hidden room, a sound outside made him freeze. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but his trained senses picked up the soft rustle of movement beyond the colony's perimeter. He glanced at Kyle, who looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. The child made a small sound, a note of caution, and Elias realized that Kale had sensed the presence before him. His heart began to pound, not with fear, but with anticipation. Elias approached the entrance to the hidden space slowly, peering through the small viewing window he had fashioned from translucent material. Standing there, just at the edge of the forest, was a figure unlike any Elias had seen. It was tall, regal, and otherworldly. Its skin shimmered slightly, reflecting the soft light of the morning sun, and its eyes, large and intelligent, seemed to hold the weight of the world. This was no ordinary Ziran. This was a parent, Kale's mother. Liara, as Elias would later come to know her, stood silently for a moment, observing. There was a presence about her that commanded attention without aggression. Her movements were deliberate and controlled, yet there was a softness in her gaze as it settled on Kale. Elias's mind raced. He knew that Zirons were capable of extreme emotion and fierce loyalty. The appearance of Kale's mother could mean danger, confrontation, or even retribution for Elias's actions. Yet as he watched, he felt something unexpected. Liara's stance was cautious but not hostile. There was curiosity, perhaps even concern, in the way she studied Kyle. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. Kyle moved closer to him instinctively, as if sensing both the tension and the protection Elias offered. Liara's eyes shifted between the two of them, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended. There were no words, no sounds, just the silent communication of beings trying to understand one another. Elias spoke softly, in the calmest voice he could muster, explaining that he had rescued Kale, that the child was safe, and that he meant no harm. Liara's response was a mixture of gestures and subtle expressions. At first, there was anger in her posture, a tightening of her shoulders, a small flicker of light across her skin that Elias recognized as an expression of emotion. But as she observed Kyle, who now reached out toward Elias in a gesture of trust, her demeanor softened. Elias realized that she was evaluating him, not just as a human, but as a caretaker. There was a silent question in her gaze. Did this human truly care for her child, or was he simply an intruder? Days passed with careful observation. Elias did not force contact. He continued his routines with Kale, speaking gently, teaching small lessons and maintaining the trust they had built. Kale responded with the same quiet curiosity, exploring small tasks and engaging in gestures they had created together. Meanwhile, Liara remained at the edge of the colony, watching from a distance, never approaching directly but always present in some form. Her presence was felt in the subtle shifts of the wind, the rustle of the forest, and the faint shimmer of her skin when she passed behind the trees. During this time, Elias began to notice something extraordinary. Kyle, who had always been curious and observant, began to mimic Liara's movements in a small, playful way. The child would tilt his head, shift his posture, or produce a soft sound that Elias could not replicate. It was as if Kale was attempting to communicate with his mother through Elias, bridging the gap between species and worlds. This discovery filled Elias with a mixture of awe and responsibility. He understood that Kale's bond with him did not diminish the child's connection to his mother, but rather, it created a delicate balance that required care, patience, and respect. Elias also began to learn more about Liara herself. Observing her interactions with Kale from a distance, He noticed her intelligence, her nurturing instincts, and her cautious approach to unfamiliar situations. Liara was not merely protective. She was discerning, capable of recognizing sincerity and evaluating character. Elias found himself respecting her as much as he feared her. The mother's presence added a new layer to his understanding of the Zirians. They were not simply an alien species to be studied or feared. They were complex beings with emotions, intelligence, and bonds as deep as any humans. One afternoon, as Elias guided Kale through a small exercise of stacking objects, he noticed Liara stepping slightly closer, still hidden but visible enough to observe the activity. Kyle responded immediately, producing a small sound that Elias had come to recognize as excitement or approval. Elias smiled and encouraged the child, aware that Liara was watching. In that moment, a subtle shift occurred. Liara's posture relaxed, slightly, and the tension Elias had sensed in her before seemed to soften. It was as if she were beginning to recognize not just Kale's happiness, but the role Elias played in fostering it. As the days continued, Elias and Liara began a careful, unspoken dialogue. Words were unnecessary. Gestures, actions, and consistent care conveyed trust and understanding. Elias would demonstrate patience, gentleness, and attentiveness with Kale, and Liara would observe, gradually discerning his intentions. There were moments of tension, of course, times when Kale would cry or when Elias would make a mistake, but each instance was met with understanding rather than condemnation. Slowly, the ice between human and Zyran began to melt, replaced by cautious respect. One evening, Elias found himself reflecting on the situation. He realized that he had not only gained a new responsibility in caring for Kale, but also a profound lesson in empathy and perception. Liara's presence reminded him that every action had meaning, that trust could be built even across the boundaries of species, and that understanding required patience, observation, and sincerity. He felt a deep respect for her, not just as Kale's mother, but as a being capable of seeing beyond fear and instinct to recognize truth and care. By the end of the third week, Elias sensed a remarkable change. Liara's observation had shifted from suspicion to consideration. She was no longer merely watching. She was learning about him, recognizing his dedication, and perhaps in some subtle way, beginning to feel a connection to the human who had protected her child. Elias could not predict what would come next, but he knew that their story had entered a new phase, one where trust, respect, and emotional connection could lead to unexpected and profound bonds. In the quiet of that hidden room, as Kale slept, peacefully Elias understood that the challenges ahead would be difficult. There would be questions, tests, and moments of uncertainty. But he also understood something more important, that through patience, care, and consistent kindness, even the most unlikely of connections could grow into understanding and mutual respect. And in that understanding, he sensed the first fragile beginnings of something far deeper, an emotional bond that could bridge worlds and change lives forever. Time passed, and the quiet observation that had begun between Elias and Liara evolved into something more meaningful. Liara continued to watch Elias interact with Kale, noticing every gentle gesture, every patient word, and every act of care. She was fascinated. This human, so unlike the humans she had heard about in stories, treated her child with a level of kindness and attention she had never expected. It was clear that Elias's connection with Kyle went far beyond obligation. He genuinely cared. Liara's curiosity slowly shifted into respect. She began to recognize the small ways Elias anticipated Kale's needs, how he responded to the child's emotions, and how he balanced patience with quiet firmness. These were qualities Liara valued deeply. She realized that Elias's presence offered Kale not only safety but also guidance, a stable foundation in a world full of uncertainty. Watching them together, she felt a mixture of relief and admiration. Kale was safe, happy, and thriving under Elias's care. One day, Elias noticed Liara moving closer than usual, still careful to remain at a respectful distance. Kyle, excited by the sight, produced a series of soft, playful sounds. Elias encouraged the interaction, realizing that Kyle was attempting to communicate with his mother, even in Elias's presence. It was a delicate moment, full of unspoken understanding, and Elias felt a quiet pride in seeing the child bridge the gap between their worlds. He also realized that Liara's approach reflected a growing trust in him, trust he had earned through patience, consistency, and care. Elias began to take small steps to include Liara in their routines. He would leave messages or small objects for her to observe, demonstrating the child's progress and learning. Liara responded subtly, adjusting her gestures or leaving signs that Elias could recognize, a quiet dialogue of understanding forming between them. Each interaction reinforced the idea that they could work together for Kale's well-being, creating a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. As the days passed, Liara's feelings began to shift in unexpected ways. She saw in Lysander Elias qualities that resonated deeply with her own values: patience, compassion, and courage in the face of uncertainty. It was not just respect she felt, it was a fascination and quiet admiration for the human who had risked everything to protect her child. She realized that his presence brought a sense of calm and reassurance, not only to Kale but also to her own heart. Elias, for his part, remained unaware of the depth of Liara's emerging feelings. He focused on Kale, guiding, teaching, and protecting him. Yet he could sense subtle changes in Liara's behavior, how she lingered longer in observation, how she seemed attuned to the rhythm of their days, and how her gestures suggested concern and care. Elias began to see her not just as Kale's mother, but as a being of extraordinary depth, intelligence, and emotion. Their connection was growing quietly, like roots intertwining beneath the surface. One afternoon, a minor accident occurred. Kale tripped on a small rock while exploring the area near their hidden room. Elias rushed to his side, holding the child and checking for injuries. Liara's reaction was immediate. She moved closer than before, her presence radiating concern. Elias quickly reassured her with calm words and gestures, showing that Kyle was unharmed. Liara's eyes softened, and for the first time she seemed to recognize Elias not merely as a protector of her child, but as someone capable of understanding, care, and moral strength. From that day onward, Liara began to participate in subtle ways. She would guide Kyle with gentle gestures, indicate items he should notice, or respond to his playful sounds with quiet encouragement. Elias welcomed this without hesitation, understanding that their collaboration was beneficial for Kale. Together, they created a small harmonious routine, a partnership of care, observation, and trust. The three of them formed an unusual but powerful family unit, bridging the differences of species through love, patience, and shared purpose. By the end of the 4th week, Liara's admiration for Elias had deepened into something profound. She realized that his courage, kindness, and unwavering commitment to Kale reflected values she cherished above all. For the first time, she considered the possibility that she desired his presence not merely as an ally, but as an irreplaceable part of her life. It was a subtle, quiet recognition, one that did not interfere with their shared duties but added depth and warmth to every interaction. Elias continued to focus on Kale, teaching, guiding, and nurturing him, unaware of the emotional transformation occurring in Liara. Yet the bond between them was now unmistakable. Their shared care of Kale, combined with respect, understanding, and empathy, had created a foundation for trust, loyalty, and unspoken affection. It was a delicate balance, maintained through patience, observation, and consistent acts of kindness. In the quiet moments as Kale slept peacefully, Elias would glance at Liara and feel a sense of unity that transcended words. The three of them were connected, not only through duty and care but also through shared emotion and understanding. In that connection, Elias sensed the strength of something rare, a family formed across boundaries, species, and expectations, bound together by trust, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to one another. Life continued, and the bond between Elias, Kale, and Liara grew stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a cautious observation and hesitant trust transformed into a deep, meaningful relationship. Elias's devotion to Kale remained constant, but now he began to notice the quiet ways Liara supported them, guiding the child, offering insight, and sharing her presence in subtle, meaningful ways. Their partnership was no longer tentative. It had become a harmonious routine built on respect, care, and mutual understanding. One day, a minor threat emerged. Unpredictable environmental conditions caused a small landslide near the edge of the colony. Elias and Liara worked together seamlessly, guiding Kale to safety and ensuring that he remained calm throughout the event. The experience demonstrated not only their effectiveness as a team, but also the depth of trust Kale had in both of them. Elias realized that the child's safety and happiness were not only a personal responsibility, but a shared commitment with Liara, solidifying the connection between them all. During the weeks that followed, Elias noticed subtle changes in Liara. She began seeking his presence more often, lingering nearby during routines and occasionally leaving small tokens of acknowledgement, an object placed gently, a soft sound, a gesture of encouragement. It was clear that her admiration for him had grown into something deeper, something that transcended duty or curiosity. Elias, unaware of the full extent of her feelings, responded with patience, kindness, and quiet respect, allowing the bond to develop naturally. Kyle flourished under their care. He learned new skills, communicated more effectively, and displayed remarkable creativity and curiosity. Both Elias and Liara took turns guiding him, fostering an environment where learning and play were intertwined. The child's happiness became the central force shaping their days, and through Kyle, Elias and Liara began to understand one another in ways that words alone could not express. Shared experiences, small victories, and moments of laughter wove an unbreakable thread between them. Over time, Elias began to sense the emotional depth of Liara's attachment. It was subtle at first, a lingering look, a gentle gesture, a quiet presence during moments of reflection, but gradually it became undeniable. Liara admired his courage, respected his integrity, and valued the kindness and patience he displayed toward Kale. More than admiration, however, there was an emotional longing, a recognition that his presence brought comfort, reassurance, and a sense of unity she had never felt before. The turning point came one evening when Elias and Liara found themselves alone with Kale, who had fallen asleep after an energetic day of exploration. Liara spoke softly, using gestures and subtle sounds that Elias could interpret through his growing understanding of Xerian communication. She conveyed gratitude, trust, and something more, an acknowledgement of the human's role not only as Kale's protector but as someone who had become central to her life. Elias, though surprised, responded with gentle reassurance and humility, recognizing the bond that had formed without forcing it. From that moment onward, the dynamic between them subtly shifted. Liara's admiration and emotional attachment deepened, and Elias responded with care, patience, and attentiveness. They continued to work together to nurture Kale, creating a balanced environment of learning, love, and guidance. The child became the living bridge between their worlds, connecting human and Xerian through trust, empathy, and shared experience. In the months that followed, the three of them became inseparable. Elias's commitment to Kale remained unwavering, and Liara's presence provided guidance, insight, and warmth. Together they faced challenges, minor conflicts, unexpected events, and the ever-present uncertainty of the wider world, but they did so as a united family. Each day reinforced the trust, affection, and interdependence that had formed among them, creating a bond that could withstand the test of time. One quiet evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, Elias, Kale, and Liara sat together outside, their hidden space. Kale laughed softly, exploring a small toy while Elias and Liara exchanged a glance filled with understanding and unspoken emotion. In that moment, it was clear that they had formed something extraordinary, A family not bound by blood, but by love, trust, and the shared determination to protect and nurture one another. Elias reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter in the forest to the formation of a unique interspecies family. He felt gratitude for the unexpected bond, pride in Kale's growth, and respect for Liara's wisdom and compassion. The challenges they had faced had strengthened them, and the love and trust that had grown between them promised a future full of shared experiences, understanding, and deep connection. As night fell, the three of them remained close, a quiet family bound not by origin, but by choice, courage, and the unwavering commitment to care for one another. Elias knew that whatever the future might bring, they would face it together. Kale, Liara, and himself, united by the bonds they had nurtured and the love that had blossomed from courage, kindness, and trust.